Hello people, it's Daniel from Devil & Sons Guitars here, and today I'm really happy to show you one of my most recent customisations on a guitar. It's this one next to me, the Supernatural PRS. So in this video, I'm going to go through the process I went through to take a PRS guitar, basically cut a massive hole in it, and put this new acrylic top with design on it. The design's from the Supernatural series, some of you may recognise that. It's also got a very cool back, but you'll see that later on. It's for a client of mine called Stefan. Now, I've designed two guitars for Stefan before. The first one was this really cool Walking Dead themed one with Negan on it. I enjoyed making this a lot. But what I also enjoyed was the design process we went through, because when Stefan approached me, he wasn't sure exactly what he wanted. And one of the options was actually a Supernatural guitar, but we ended up going with the Walking Dead theme. Then for his second guitar, he really wanted something that connected with one of his favourite bands, Hollywood Undead. And in fact, he took that guitar when he went to meet them and they signed it. It's just super cool. And then for this third one, we finally went back to Supernatural, a TV show he loves. And I must admit, one I haven't seen yet, found it a bit daunting looking at how many seasons there are of it. But making this has made me really want to get into it. So let's see what happens. Let me know below if you're a fan. So in this video, I'm going to quickly talk through the design process, and then we'll do some sped up footage and some close-ups of how I actually made the body and how I designed the back. You may notice it's got LEDs in it that flash and pulse in different ways, and those LEDs carry on up the neck. Well, I'm only going to summarise how the neck is made in this, because putting LEDs in the neck is something I know a lot of you are interested in. So I made a whole other video about how to do that, which is coming out soon. So subscribe if you want to see that. But for now, let's get down to the bench. So here you can see some of the design options and iterations I went through with Stefan, suggesting the wings going on the side or the symbol just below the bridge, the size of that. The process is I basically mock up a few versions, send them to him. He says, oh, I'd like them bigger, I like this, I like that, and we make the changes. And then I made the wings and the symbol into vector files that I could print out the exact size on my Cricut vinyl cutter. Essentially what I'm making here is a stencil. So it prints like you would expect a printer to print a black and white image, but it prints the outline onto the vinyl. I can then peel off the equivalent of the black or the white space, and that leaves me with the rest I can transfer over to the guitar, ready to paint onto, using this as a stencil. So it's a kind of sticky back, thin vinyl where the stick on it is not so strong that it will leave a mark on the guitar or affect the paintwork in any way. Now, I haven't recorded myself painting it, but I used a spray can just to cover the area, and I'm painting directly onto white acrylic. The white acrylic will let the lights that I'm going to put behind it through, but at the same time the white will diffuse it slightly. Then it's just a matter of cutting them out. Once they're cut out and sanded, I then mark out the positions they're going to go in on the guitar. You can see I've covered the guitar in masking tape. That allows me to pencil in where it's going to go. I'm using a laser line to make sure I've got everything lined up along the middle in relation to the fretboard. I've also got printouts on paper that I've used to mark out the size and just check everything was fine before I went ahead and made them on the Cricut. Now basically to hollow out the body to allow for the wings to fit in with the LEDs underneath them, I used various Dremel bits and chisels to knock out a bit of space. Now one thing I had to do was use the router bits and the chisel first to get the depth of the acrylic so the wings sat perfectly in it, before making the deeper recess that the LEDs will go in. And for that I used the Forstner bits. Now the reason I painted the black onto the acrylic is I thought I was then just going to be putting over a thin layer of sepia colour. But as you'll see, as we started putting the design together, we changed it and made it more yellow. So what ended up happening is I had to put the paint on and redo some of the black, whereas if I used the sepia colour I was originally going to use, it was just a light tint and it would have let the black shine through. So possibly it would have been better to have painted the wings, the acrylic first, and then put the black on using the stencil. Now once I painted the image onto the wings, I then drilled in the holes where the volume and tone would go, and the pickup controller. And actually I ended up putting another layer of paint on. just to make sure the colour was exactly what we wanted. What I'm doing in this bit is putting foil into the recess where the lights are going to go. It's the same foil I use for shielding my cavities, but the reason I'm doing that is it lets the light reflect back. But I found from experience I need to make sure that this foil doesn't in any way link to the ground loop of the electronics of the guitar, because sometimes that can cause a little bit of buzzing and feedback. So here on the left, you can see what the lights look like when we're finished. Don't forget, I'm not going to show you in this video completely how I made the neck and put those in. That's a long process and people have asked me to do that in a separate video. In fact, I'm going to make a few videos. One looking at this guitar and 2 others looking at other guitars that all put LEDs in the fretboards but in a slightly different way. I left all the LEDs on whilst I was working just in case I accidentally cut a wire or fused something somehow. Now once the lights are in place, I simply glued my acrylic onto the ledges using a 2-part epoxy and then used a separate 2-part epoxy putty to fill any gaps and level them off. Now the one I'm using here is called Milliput. So now there's a few things to do. Whilst the Milliput's wet, it's easy to cut, but also once it's dry, I can scrape it just like this with my scalpel to make it nice and smooth, a bit like you might do with wood and a cabinet scraper. Above me here, I'm putting some black back into that to cover the Milliput up. That could be done with paint and a paintbrush. I'm using a paint pen. And then here you can see the next stage is basically to sand it smooth. And one thing I've noticed is you sand it smooth, repaint, refill. When there's little gaps, you've got to get it perfect, or as perfect as you can at this stage. And then I can blend it into the charcoal finish in the background using my airbrush. Now I've skipped a stage here, didn't need to film the fact that I have varnished. I put my clear coat on, I'm using Spray Max 2K, but once that's on, I sand down ready to buff, but that's also a good chance to expose any uneven bits that might be there from the Milliput. So what normally happens with a process like this is I'll sand it flat, you'll see some exposed bits like you can just here, and those exposed bits then need refilling, re-smoothing, repainting, ready for another set of clear coats before I then go back, do all the buffing and the final setup of the guitar. Fantastic. For those of you that follow me, you'll probably know that I don't make sponsored videos. I make videos of work I do for my clients like this and things that I think will be helpful, because my background is in arts education. I'm an artist, I'm an educator, and that's what I want to do with this YouTube channel. But because I'm not sponsored and because I don't do paid promotions, it's hard to justify what I'm doing, which is why I'm going to ask you, if you've enjoyed this, maybe you can tip me a tea. Or maybe you can even splash out and buy a tee. I sell tees through my website. That's t-shirts. The money I get from them really helps me justify spending as many hours as I do. Not just filming, because the filming adds a lot of time onto the making, but the editing takes days. It's something I really love and I do enjoy doing. And if you can't afford a tip, don't worry. Maybe you can just leave me a comment. I love the conversations I have with people on YouTube. That really helps justify why I do things, knowing that people have found it useful or hearing what other people are doing. So do tag me in social media if you're customizing guitars yourself, especially if you've got a supernatural one. I'd love to see that. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope it's been fun for you. I've got more images of this guitar and the process I went through over on my Instagram account and some up on my Facebook too, so do go and follow me there. I've recently joined Reddit. I don't really know what I'm doing, so if you're over on Reddit, give me a nudge and suggest some things to me. Until next time, happy strumming.